Hi guys, in today's video we're going to check out if Arjun Erigaisi is able to get closer to Magnus Carlsen on the world rankings list. Now, he's playing in round 6 of the Chennai Masters with the black pieces against Chithambaram Aravindh. It's a player you may not have heard of before, but it's a name to remember. He's really strong. He's a bit older than his fellow countrymen like Arjun and Prag and Gukesh. He's 25 years old. But very strong, talented player. Let's find out what's happening in this game. I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy the action on the board. And if you do like my videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Aravindh starts the game with 1d4. Knight f6 and bishop g5. It's a Trompovsky variation. Black played here the move d5. And of course you can consider to take with the bishop on f6, give up the bishop pair to ruin the pawn structure. It's a decision. Apparently, Aravindh prefers here to keep the bishop on the board, play the move e3. Black goes for g6, so basically provoking here white to take now, because after knight d2, which was played in the game, there follows bishop g7, and now it's no longer attractive to take, because black is able to take back with the bishop when the pawn structure remains intact. Knight gf3, castling kingside, bishop e2, c5, c3. I mean, this is all pretty standard, looks very similar to London system structures, where the bishop is in fact on f4. Here's the bishop on g5, but white is rock solid. It's very difficult to make any progress here with black. First things first, both sides need to complete their development. b6 was played, castling kingside, bishop b7, and now Aravindh is trying to make some progress on the queen side by playing here the move b4, adding more pressure to the pawn on c5. Black has different ways of playing. I mean, you can take on d4 or b4, advance the pawn. Knight bd7 was played. It's also a good move just to maintain the tension, protecting the pawn. But here white decides to take first. Pawn takes c5, b takes c5, and the queen comes to b3 to hit the bishop on b7. Black defends it with the move queen c8, so the bishop is fine. But white is going to make some progress. Played here the move a4. Interesting idea. We'll understand why the pawn is going there very soon. h6, attacking the bishop. And now rook a b1. Renewing the attack on the bishop on b7. Ignoring black's last move, because the bishop can be taken. But okay, in that case, white is more active. And also this pawn doesn't look very nice. So here, rather than taking the bishop on g5, black played here the move bishop c6. Now the bishop comes back to f4, so controlling the b8 square, so black is unable to put a piece there. And well, typically for these structures, black is going to fight against that bishop on f4. That can be done in different ways. Something like knight h5 is an interesting move. I think that's something I would have played. But Arjun Erigaisi, he's taking a lot of risks, and that's of course his main strength. I mean, he's not afraid of losing, but now he's playing this move, g5, and you know these pawns, they cannot go backwards. It's clear that he's hitting the bishop. Bishop went to e5, and well, of course, black's king becomes more exposed. But okay, the question is white able to make use of that very soon? Black advance the pawn to c4, attacking the queen. And now the queen goes to a3. Very nice square. I think that queen is doing a great job attacking the pawn on e7. And what should black do? Should black defend that pawn? Well, probably that is something to do very soon. But maybe it's better here to play the move g4, to hit the knight. So this was not played in the game. But if the knight goes away, then you can take on e5, and well, it's a very sharp and unclear position. Like the knight can go back, and you may take the pawn here, but then it's rook e8. It's a total mess. But that's probably something Erigaisi would have liked to play, but for some reason he didn't do that. Instead of playing g4, he went for rook e8, and he's just defending the pawn. But now, very important move, as white played here the move h3. Sorry, h3, very good move. To control the g4 square. So this move g4, chasing the knight away, is no longer possible. It's a very nice prophylactical move. And well, the bishop is sort of threatening to go back to h2, and then it stays on the board. So I think the critical move here, which was not played, is to take that bishop. I mean, it's the most principled way. When you advance your kingside pawns, the main point is to get that bishop very soon. Now, after this move, the bishop can be rerouted to a better square from where it is able to contest the open file and the rook on b1. Well, anyway, bishop f8 was Erigaisi's move in the game, and of course it's clear what he's trying to accomplish. He wants to attack the queen, but that's not such a big deal. The queen can just go back to a2. Very nice move. You keep the pawn defended, and white has to make sure that he's not going to lose the pawn. So for instance, if black would play queen a6, you can just advance the pawn, and the pawn is pretty okay. What is important to realize is that the queen on a2, it's not badly placed at all. It can rejoin play very soon. It can go to c2, for instance. But it also keeps pressure against these pawns. And white, very soon, will try to prepare that pawn break with e3, e4 to challenge that pawn chain. Well, in the game, black played g4. Now, pawn is going to be exchanged. Knight takes back. And the bishop goes back to g3. I think if you compare the king's positions, I mean, white's king looks much safer being protected by these pawns and also the minor pieces, of course. But black is definitely missing that g pawn. So frankly speaking, I think Erigaisi has gone too far in this position. Bishop g7, guarding the king a bit more. Rook f e1, good move, as the rook is trying to open up the position with the help of the e-pawn. Knight f8, black is trying to get some more pieces over to the king side, but now the knight comes to h2. Very good move, so that you try to trade off that piece, which is what happened in the game. Knight takes h2, bishop takes h2, and white is just one move away from getting in that pawn break with e4, when basically all these pieces, they will have a much brighter future. So Erigaisi wants to avoid that and plays here the move e5 himself. But that's also very risky, as now after the exchange of pieces on e5, the knight comes to f3 with tempo. So the rook got to move. It went back to e6. And well, here again, I think white has just a fantastic position. A lot of interesting moves. You can put a knight on d4 to create an attack. Doesn't win material, and well, maybe sometimes it's better to be flexible, to keep that threat in the position. Rook bd1 is a move I do like a lot as well. Just trying to get that rook into the game via the fourth rank. But after bishop b7, the move knight d4 was played anyway. I think, as I said, that rook maneuver could have been very interesting as well. But black is in big trouble here. Rook g6. Coming over to the king side, maybe looking for some ideas to get the queen over to h3 and try to generate some threats against the king. But there's bishop h5, attacking the rook. Rook g5, attacking the bishop, counterattack. But here the queen comes into e2. And you see that the queen is defending the bishop, but also looking for possibilities, probably to put itself on f3 and hit the pawn on f7. So white is defending his own king, but at the same time looking for opportunities to take over the initiative. Queen d7 was played. f4, hitting the rook. Look at this rook. The rook is not a very happy piece here. It went back to g7, but now the queen goes to c2. Very interesting move to defend the pawn, but also to prepare that move knight f5, which can count on the support of the queen. So fantastic maneuvering by white. Everything is under control. All the pawns are protected. No threats against the king. So very nice piece play by white here. Knight e6 was played, offering the exchange of knights, but the knight comes in to f5 to hit the rook on g7. Rook has to go to h7. That's a very unfortunate square to go to, but there's no other option. And here again, well, your position is wonderful, but how do you proceed? And I think what Aravindh is doing is very, very interesting. I mean, I could just go back with the bishop to f3 and say, I have everything under control. Probably I'm going to double rooks on the d file and hit that pawn on d5. But Aravindh understands that his pieces are already very nicely placed here. And therefore he says, I just want to open up the position, because the earlier the position gets open, the faster he is able to get access to the black king. But it involves a pawn sacrifice, because there's knight takes f4 and the bishop is under an attack. But look at this. Here Aravindh had calculated very nicely. He can still move the bishop, but instead he's trying to win the game in style by opening up the center here with pawn takes d5. But wait a second, guys. Here this bishop is just hanging. But why did Erigaisi not play that? Well, there is rook e7 with a fantastic threat along the 7th rank, hitting the queen. The queen got to go back to support the bishop. But now with a very subtle queen maneuver, queen f2, well, everything is fantastically covered here. There are perhaps threats maybe like knight takes h6 and then take on f7. But probably the plan with d6, d7 to march forward with the d-pawn is even stronger. But because it doesn't matter that you're a piece down. Black's pieces are not working together here. The rook is in the corner on a8. The other rook looks awful. Also, the minor pieces are terrible. The queen cannot move because it has to keep the bishop defended. So I think this is probably one of the hardest things for players of my strength and even lower. How can you sacrifice such a piece when you don't have like an immediate sort of compensation? It's sort of, I mean, the white's pieces are superior, but is it really worth a piece? I think that is something which is really difficult to evaluate, especially when getting lower on time and the tension increases. So, very interesting play. Black decided not to take that bishop on h5. Played here the move f6. But now the bishop comes back to g4, setting up a threat of knight takes h6 check when the queen on d7 can be taken. So the queen went back to d8. Now the rook is hoping to rejoin play at some point. But look at this, rook d4. The rook is coming to that square anyway, attacking the knight. And, well, if you take the pawn on d5, there is bishop f3 with tremendous spins. White is going to pick up the knight very, very soon. So that is not a good option for black. There followed knight d3, attacking the rook on e1. There are a lot of interesting squares, but I do like Aravindh, his play. He played rook f1, and he's looking for ways to generate some activity along the f-file. Knight went back to e5 to hit the bishop. The bishop went back to a3, nicely guarding everything, especially the g2 pawn. King h8 played. By the way, taking the pawn again is not such a good idea because of knight e3, and the bishop is gone. So therefore, king h8 played. Now the pawn is coming forward. d6. That's a huge asset for white. And what can black do? Well, black is completely stuck here, but he should try something. Queen g8 was played here. So there are perhaps some ideas to attack the pawn on g2. The pawn on g2 is pinned. So there is this threat of knight f3 perhaps, with a knight fork against the king and rook. So rook went to f4, covering that square and doubling on the f-file. Queen g5, knight e7. Very nice move, because here the rooks have a clear target in mind. It's the pawn on f6. And there's not much you can do to defend it. For instance, if you play here this move, rook f8, just one simple line, very nice idea. You can play queen f2, attacking the pawn one more time. If you do play knight d3, forking queen and rook, it's rook takes f6, queen sacrifice, because after taking the queen, it's rook takes f8 with check. If you go to g7, you go rook g8, and you're about to pick up the queen. But before you do that, you also take that knight on f2 with check. It's completely game over here. White is up a lot of material. But therefore, instead of rook f8 defending the pawn, rook g7 was played. Black is looking for counterplay, but thanks to that beautiful bishop on h3, it's not going to be very serious. Rook takes f6 is possible now. Rook a g8, and here it is. Knight takes g8. I mean, you didn't have to play rook a g8, but the threat is to go here rook f8, and the queen is preventing the king from escaping to h7. So there are sort of threats to give a check on f8. By playing rook ag8, rook f8 doesn't come with tempo, not with a check, but after knight takes, rook takes, here white is just up the exchange, played here rook f8, initiating more exchanges is a good strategy, taking away the threats against the white king. Knight e3 played, rook takes, rook king takes, and now d7, the d pawn is really strong, and the only thing white needs to do is try to get in the queen and rook or to promote a pawn. That is just game over. Queen e3 check was played, and now a beautiful move to finish off the game here. It is queen f2, and black resigned as white is sacrificing his queen and solving the check. But if you do take on f2, it's d8 queen with check. After king g7, you can just simply take on f2. The line even continues a bit more, like after queen e1 check, you don't want to lose the rook. You go rook f1, queen e3. And now, the last thing you should not forget about is that king h1 runs into queen takes h3 as the pawn on g2 is pinned. So that would lead to checkmate for black. But of course, after queen e3, you put your king on h2. Then it is just game over, because the only check now is queen e5. But then after king h1, it's just game over. So beautiful finish and a very important win for the 25-year-old, very talented player Chithambaram Aravindh. Remember that name. He has not played that many super tournaments yet. But, well, with such a win against world's number 2, and now because of this loss, Arjun Erigaisi is back to world's number 4. I hope that Aravindh will get more invitations. It's a very interesting player. He's not playing too many theoretical lines, but he's just trying to create something over the board. Very good understanding mixed with tactical vision. It can really make you a superstar. So this is probably the new superstar from India. They have so many great players in the world's top 100 and even in the world's top 20. So I'm curious to see how he's going to develop in the next couple of months and years. Well, let me know in the comments what you think of this game, and I will see you soon again. Bye bye.